Happy Halloween and welcome to Big Ten Today. It is great to have you with us once again, masquerading as a sportscaster this year. I am Dave Revson. I'm joined by Dave Wanstead. Festive.
First class, absolutely.
Festive.
Jacob, nice job, right?
Yeah, Jacob Ruffman. This is the kind of high-level decision he had to make for this show. You know, how to position the pumpkins.
Absolutely.
I think he's done a great job.
Thinking about Halloween, obviously, a lot of teams got some treats last weekend, and a lot of them were tricked, right? When you think of the wins, Northwestern, right? I mean, Rutgers, Nebraska, they got the treats for their fans, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, we'll talk through basically the entire league, but it's interesting, we do usher out October today, obviously, with Halloween. We usher in November when we start thinking about positioning for the college football playoff, and interestingly enough, it is the day that the rankings come out here on the last day of October, so that is our big story. We want to remind you where everyone stands in the AP poll. Two-time defending national champ Georgia is still number one. Michigan is second. Ohio State is third. A couple future Big Ten teams will definitely be in the discussion for the top six tonight, Washington and Oregon. Penn State by no means out of this. They are ninth in the AP. Will be very interesting to see how the committee treats them tonight. I'm interested in getting your take, Wanny. I think there isn't a clear-cut number one.
Right.
And so interested in getting your take, at least with the first two, on kind of making the case for them as number one. And I think where it gets interesting is the kind of two schools of thought, right? You have one, which is resume, and the other is the eye test. And you don't really get a sense for a committee until you see their first rankings. Then you can say, okay, this is more of a resume committee. This is more of an eye test committee, right, based on both what you see from them and what they articulate when they explain what they did. So let's make the case for Michigan. Again, there were 9 people in that AP voting who thought they are the best team in the country, who thought they're number one. Make the case for them as number one.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think eye test. I mean, you mentioned that. I mean, they're the most dominating team offensively and defensively in college football. You know, their win margins, I mean, how they're doing it. They're not a one-dimensional team. Some of these teams, you say, oh, yeah, they're very good because they throw for 500 yards a game, but they can't run it. You know, when they get into the playoffs and the weather changes and on, we're nervous about them. Can they find a way to win a game? You know, when you look at this offense, and it starts with the quarterback. I mean, J.J. McCarthy, that's a big deal in my opinion. When you have a quarterback that is completing 78% of his passes, we know all the numbers, but he is a legit Heisman candidate, right, and he is leading your team. That's a big plus in my opinion. It's beyond just an eye test. I mean, there's some validity why they're winning, and then you throw the defense in there. You know, top scoring defense, yards. I mean, they're playing as well as anybody. So, and then I think you got a coach too. I mean, I think you got to put Jim in there, and they've got a coach that's been there and knows what he's doing. I think that's when you all inclusive. I see them being right now the number one team in the rankings because of all those reasons. I don't know any soft spots.
They've been the most dominant team. So if you're going to go eye test, right? The resume is lacking, as is Georgia's resume, frankly, right? Georgia doesn't have a great overwhelming win. They haven't played a high-level opponent yet to the degree that, let's say, Ohio State has, and we'll get to them in a moment. Neither has Michigan. Now, I was looking at the Sagarin ratings of strength of schedule. There's a million strength of schedule ratings out there. I just chose that one, pretty well known. Michigan's 68th in strength of schedule, according to Sagarin. Georgia's 81st. So again, if you're going to do eye test, Michigan leading the nation in scoring differential. To your point, they have just kind of overwhelmed people so far this year more than anyone else. They're leading by a fairly significant margin. Right. If you're an eye test person, it's hard to argue against Michigan. Right. Because if you are going eye test, you're probably stacking them up with Georgia. And they have been more dominant than Georgia has so far. So that's the argument there for Michigan. They're an eye test argument. Right. Ohio State, it feels to me like if you're going to make the case for them as number one, and again, there were 3 voters who did that in the AP poll, it feels like the case you're making there is resume related.
Yeah, it is, obviously, because of the big wins they had, right? You know, Penn State and Notre Dame, you know, when they played them both, they were both top 10. We know that. And they're still ranked, you know, up in the top 20. So that's a definite pause from a resume thing. I would say this, that if I'm Ohio State, all you want to do is get into the playoffs. I was thinking about this when I was at the University of Miami, 1986. The closest margin of defeat that we had, we beat everybody by at least 2 touchdowns all year long. Just kind of ran the table, went right through it, and we lost to Penn State in the national championship game. Okay, the next year we come back. We had 4 games that were 10 points or less. One of them a 1-point game. And, it kind of reminds me of this Ohio State team. Boy, every weekend we were playing good defense. We found a way to win, running the ball a little bit, throwing the ball a little bit. And guess what? At the end of the day, we win the national championship. Yeah. So I look at this Ohio State team and, where will they be ranked? I don't know. Is it third? Is it fourth? They're going to be in the playoffs. Just keep winning, doing what you're doing. And this is, people shouldn't get bent out of shape. Heck, last time Ohio State, when they won the national championship in 2015, they started off, I went back, 16th and worked their way up. So don't overreact right now. You got a great football team. You've won more games versus ranked opponents, and you're still in work in progress. I kind of there's something about that.
I've got to say, it would not surprise me if they are number 1.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not necessarily saying that I think they're
because of the resume,
best team, but I think they're really good.
Yep.
I think they could prove to be the best team before the year's over in exactly the way that you're saying. They're not going to beat people by 35 points routinely this year. It's just not the way this team is built. But the point of the game is to have more points than the opposition at the end. They've done that in every game. They have a fabulous defense. They have beaten 2 really good teams in Notre Dame and Penn State. The Notre Dame game was on the road. I could see an argument, absolutely, where they're number 1. The other kind of resume team that you'd argue for would be Florida State, but that win over Clemson does not carry the same weight that it did early in the year, so then you're hanging your hat on LSU. It feels to me like there's an argument to be made for Ohio State here.
I agree with you. You could look at the teams they beat, and we said Michigan, got the most dominant, complete team. Well, all of a sudden you start saying, well, let's look at this defense. Oh, who's right behind Michigan? Who's number 2 scoring defense in the whole country? Ohio State. And I tell you what, sitting there watching the game, when our man Henderson was in the game, they looked like a faster team.
Yeah.
It was really amazing to me how one player at one position just seemed to – it was a little bit of energy, but it was also like the whole thing was moving faster, when he got the ball. And so now that he's back and he's back healthy, hey, that's going to help your quarterback. Everyone's a little bit worried about Kyle McCord, his inexperience. What is the number 1 thing that helps a quarterback? A good running game. What the defensive coaches, I coached defense all my life. The best defenses that I had when we won championships, it was because we had a good running attack, So a great running attack can mean a lot more to your football team. And so it's not just who they beat. All of a sudden, they've got some star players that do outstanding things. And sometimes, and then we didn't mention Marvin Harrison.
Right. We'll talk about him later in the show.
Oh,
but for sure. But Henderson has missed several games here.
Yep.
So you're talking about taking an All-American running back out. And they were still winning games. So now you reinsert him into the lineup, and you're right. The run game looked totally different against Wisconsin. I want to put you on the spot a little bit because we're talking about eye test versus resume. And I do think that's the discussion. Again, that's the discussion tonight. It is probably the discussion Michigan against Ohio State. It's the discussion when you're weighing Florida State against Georgia. That's what it is. It's eye test versus resume. If you were on this committee, are you more an eye test guy or are you more a resume guy?
Unfortunately, I'm an eye test guy. I'm the guy that says, let's meet in the parking lot right here at the Big Ten Network. And, what team do I think would win right out here? You know what I mean? And right now, I'm just a little bit more to Michigan.
Okay.
But not by much, but just a little bit, They'll have a chance to prove it. Michigan schedule-wise, in my opinion, they're going to have to prove it. They're going to have to prove and build their resume by some victories versus some big-time teams.
Well, that's the other thing to think about when you get this first ranking. So they're telling you we're either eye test or we're strength of schedule. But I also think, like, Michigan's going to have the strength of schedule at the end of the year.
Yep.
So if they decide, well, we're going to knock them because of who they played to this point, that's going to get rectified when, as you say, they play Penn State and Ohio State and Maryland here down the stretch, and they'll be in the Big Ten championship game. I mean, if again, like, if they go undefeated, obviously, if either of these teams goes undefeated, they're going to get in. The issue becomes, if you're a one-loss team, do you have a chance to get in? That's where the debate is. If either of these teams wins out, they'll be there, and the strength of schedule is going to improve for Michigan. But again, it is significantly ahead of Georgia's right now, according to Sagarin. So if we're going by who have you played, who have you beat, Michigan gets a leg up. I mean, I think there's this natural inclination because Georgia's the two-time defending national champ. A lot of people just keep them up there until they lose, and they're really good, and they play great this weekend against Florida.
Right.
But again, kind of what are the measurements that you're putting in there? I do want to talk about Penn State. And obviously, there's no case for the top spot with Penn State, with the loss they had to Ohio State. They didn't play great this past weekend in the bounce back against Indiana. But everything that we said for the other two teams, I think is true of Penn State, too. I mean, if they figure out a way to beat Michigan, and then if they find themselves in the Big Ten championship based on if there's a tiebreaker and they're the team that gets there and they win that, they're almost certainly going. So how do you assess Penn State if you're looking at them through the eye of a committee member?
I would be excited. I mean, I would say this team, yeah, you're right, because they're still seriously in the hunt. And it was a little bit of the hangover from last week. There's no question the Ohio State hangover. And give Indiana some credit. Indiana played better than I thought they could. So, it was a tough game mentally for them to bounce back that quick because they had everything focused, obviously, on Ohio State. I get all that stuff. The big issues. Can we make big plays? Well, they made the big play, 57-yard pass when they had to at the end. So they came up with a big play. The one thing that's missing, Singleton last year, what did he have? He led
7 runs of 40 yards alone.
Led the country.
Yeah,
okay,
has 0 this year.
Has 0 this year. But if you look at them close, right now they're third in the Big Ten in running the ball. And when you have a lead, you don't need – everybody would like to have the 40-yard run, but I would tell Penn State fans, hey, just relax, just keep pounding that ball because you are having success running the ball.
Yeah.
We're all just waiting for that big run, but you can close out games by making those 3, 4, 5-yard runs. So I'm not overreacting on Penn State. I like where they're at. They're protecting the football as well as anybody. And their defense, the only thing that makes you nervous about Penn State is, do they have to play with a lead? Okay? There's some teams that are kind of constructed to play with a lead. In the NFL, you see it all the time. When Aaron Rodgers was hitting on all cylinders, the Packers drafted guys, and they got guys that could come after the passer and cover.
Right.
But, oh, boy, if they were behind, they couldn't win. So that's the only thing that makes me nervous. Games get into the fourth quarter against Penn State, and it's closer. They're behind by a score. Can they be the type of team that against a top team in the country that can, can you beat Michigan if the game's even at the end? That's what I'm still, we got to wait and see. That's what I'm not sure.
And this is the challenge with an inexperienced quarterback.
Yep.
Who at times has played very well, had avoided the big mistake until the game against Indiana. But again, it's a different situation than last year when you had a veteran, you had Sean Clifford there.
Right.
And frankly, you had more skill on the flank. I mean, you had more speed on the flank anyway than you do this year. And so that to me is an interesting trade-off. But I look at this team, you think about Manny Diaz and the havoc that they can provide. Look, it's going to come down to whether or not they beat Michigan.
Yeah.
Like that's what it's going to be for them. And it's all there in front of them. And if they win that game, they are going to be in this discussion just like everyone else. I mean, there you see, it's Maryland coming up this week, which is a challenging game on the road. But the Michigan game next Saturday, I mean, that is the next epic showdown here in the Big Ten this year.
You just brought a thought to my mind. This would be a game that I would have the mouse traps out, okay? I mean, Maryland has lost 3 in a row.
Yeah.
And I like Maryland's team. I mean, I don't know what happened to that defense, not to get off on, but we know what type of quarterback and passing game that they have all year. Mike Loxley's outstanding. They are an angry team. This is the mousetrap game. You know, I would have, if I'm James Franklin, I hope he's listening, go get your guys to buy some mousetraps. Have one hanging from the middle of the locker room. Put them on the desk around there, because this is a trap game. You just said it. They are looking forward to Michigan, okay? Maryland is a talented, angry team right now, and this could be a game that bites them if they are not totally focused. I mean, because this is a trap game, in my opinion. And, you know, you can only do the mousetraps once a year.
Well, you can only pull them out once, so you have to. You've got to make sure.
This is
because, you know, for Gennaro, it's the Super Bowl, right? He talks about middling mid-season games as Super Bowl games.
Yeah.
But he has no problem with his team playing 4 Super Bowls a year.
Oh.
So I like that you show the restraint. And you see, like, you can only sell them on the Super Bowl once, I think.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I've never been in the front of that room motivating, but it's only one mousetrap game a year.
One mousetrap game a year. This is it.
And this is it for Penn State,
Take
the
note.
mousetrap game. Brian Ferentz is out as Iowa's offensive coordinator, effective at the end of the season. Interim athletic director Beth Getz made that announcement in a news release yesterday. Ferentz, of course, the son of head coach Kirk Ferentz, oversees a unit that's dead last nationally in yards per game. He's been the OC since 2017. Iowa's 98th in the nation in scoring in that time, though they have won at least 8 games every year he's been at the helm, and they are 6-2 this year. Coach, you hate to see anyone lose their job. I've gotten to know Brian through the years. He's a super guy. But this felt untenable. I mean, it just felt like it wasn't going to end well. What do you think of making this announcement now?
You know, there's nothing good about it, but I think what Kurt, that head coach, and his dad was probably sensing was that this is becoming the topic, and it's taken away from our preparation.
Yeah.
And I think you got to give Brian and Kurt Ferentz a lot of credit here from the standpoint that they're doing what's best for this team. And they're making this decision to keep the fans. You don't want your player coming out there on the team for a big game that you have to win. You're trying to compete to win the West and the Big Ten, and we go 3 and out, and the fans start booing. I mean, that's from a head coach's perspective. I've been there. Okay, and you're looking around. It's just not a good feeling for your football team, you know. So I think hopefully the fans will back off right now, and the players, you know, Kurt's making the decision that we're eliminating a distraction. There's nothing now to focus on except winning, you know, and so I can't imagine doing that. This is a very tough decision for Kirk Ferentz, you know, and the way it happened at this time of the season, I think everybody was anticipating it, but he's trying to eliminate a distraction and keep up for the players' benefit and the fans and the alumni. It's a first-class, tough decision.
Well, a challenging situation. I mean, I'm not sure it was entirely his decision, right? I mean, again, the announcement came from Beth Getz. She supervises Brian Ferentz, the athletic director does, due to kind of the way that things are set up in terms of nepotism issues within the state. You can't supervise someone who is your direct relative. But again, you know, to your point,
Kirk could have raised the big
right?
stink,
I mean,
right?
You know, I agree with you, and I knowing Kirk Ferentz as well as we do, we know he is going to handle this with class, and Brian will do the same, and they'll do their job, which they've been doing. You know, they're 6-2 this year, and so again, is the offense lacking? The offense is lacking. I don't think you don't get 12 yards in the second half of a game and say everything's going swimmingly, and that's how many they had last time they were out. On the other hand, they are still well positioned to play in Indy, and so let's turn the page and look at those Big Ten West standings. The Hawks right in the thick of it, part of a 4-way tie for the lead as we enter November. They're even with Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. The Gophers are technically on top right now due to the tiebreakers. They've beaten the Hawkeyes and the Huskers. Northwestern's a game back. They have a win over Minnesota, though they did lose to Nebraska. I don't think you can totally count them out, but it feels like right now it is a 4-team race. So let's consider those 4, and those 4 only here, and their chances of making it to Indy. Let's start with the Hawkeyes. What's it going to take for them to get there?
You know, to beat Northwestern. Did
Well,
we
that'd
think
be the first stop.
Did we think
Yeah.
we were going to say that?
Right.
3 months ago that a huge game for them in Wrigley Field, right? This
Yes.
week
Yeah.
would be to beat Northwestern. Well, this is going to be a challenge this week. They're going to have to muster up some type of offense to win this game. Fortunately, defensively, really hasn't stepped back much. I mean, people lose sight, too, of the draft picks. I mean, Laporta, we saw him make 6 catches last night on Monday Night Football. And Van Ness is a number 1 pick. And our man Jack Campbell, my guy Jack Campbell, played last night, number 1 pick.
Yeah, and then injuries.
And
I mean,
injuries.
you've lost your starting quarterback. You've lost your 2 best tight ends.
I talked to Kurt this summer before the season, and I picked him to win the West for one reason, besides the coaching and the defense, Cade McNamara.
Right.
I said, this could be the best transfer portal signing ever. And here we sit right now, struggling at quarterback. It's been tough. The one thing that's disappointed me, from a football standpoint with Iowa, is their offensive line. I thought when all else failed, Rever, okay, the quarterback situation is a mess right now. They're playing good enough defense to win in special teams, but I thought that offensive line would make progress. You saw Michigan's offensive line getting better every week. Iowa's been up and down. So as a result, the running game has been up and down, in my opinion, and that doesn't help your team when your quarterback situation is.
And they had the 2 weeks where it felt like they were running it better, and then it really regressed.
200 yards a game, 180, whatever it was.
Yeah, it really regressed in that game against Minnesota. Crossover-wise, their lone remaining crossover is Rutgers.
Yeah.
They have Northwestern Illinois and Nebraska. Those are the 3 conference games. Again, there's no reason they can't make it to Indy. What about Wisconsin? They're also banged up. Also playing with a second-string quarterback. Now Braylon Allen is hurt, and Chimere Dike is hurt. It's unclear how badly. Luke Fickell said neither one of those guys practiced on Sunday. That was the update yesterday, but he said, they're out there. They're moving around a little bit, so he's certainly not showing his hand a whole lot. But what do you think of Wisconsin and their chances of being that team?
Well, they're doing a great job. I mean, defensively last week, I mean, they came up against an excellent Ohio State team. I mean, they had 9 tackles for losses, 4 sacks. I mean, they have improved as a football team, particularly defensively. But when we sat here in August and started this thing, we talked about Mordecai and Braylon Allen and Malusi. I mean, these are the names that came right off the top to me. Yes. And none of them are out there right now. So Luke's in a tough situation. And defensively, as well as they're playing, he went in, his history's 4-3. They're playing a 3-4. They're kind of in a transition. It's just a tough spot when he doesn't have his guys, but they're going to compete. They'll have a good game plan. And we'll see. I thought Brendan Locke, the quarterback that came in, I thought he did a nice job.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know much about him, and he came in, what was his numbers? 18 of 35, threw a touchdown, didn't turn the ball over. That'll give you a chance to win every week.
But given who they are, they need Braylon Allen,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, or you need Ches Malusi. I mean, the fact that you're kind of down now. Jackson Aker, I think, is going to end up being a really good back for them. But it just feels like they need more. I mean, Braylon Allen is a guy you can build your offense. And
Allen was running the ball and getting yards against Ohio State's defense. So no question about it.
Well, hopefully not out that long. They've got the one crossover coming up this week. Only crossover left is at Indiana, and then they have Northwestern, Nebraska, Minnesota. Again, all certainly winnable games here for Wisconsin. What do you make of Nebraska? They are suddenly in the thick of this.
I'll tell you what. Matt Roll, and I've known Matt for years since he was at Temple and I was at Pitt. He's starting faster now than what he did at Temple. At Temple, his first year or two, he struggled and then got him going. When he went to Baylor, he struggled the first year or two bad, and then he got it going. I give Matt Roll a lot of credit. This was not a situation of come in, we don't want any of you guys that were here.
Right.
These are mostly, Scott Frost guys, and they were good recruits and good players, and he's getting the most out of these guys. I mean, they bought in, and he's been sensitive to the whole issue. We got Coach Osborne coming back involved. So Matt's a smart guy. He's been around. He's pushing all the right buttons on the field and off the field, and his defense is play. They're running the ball. Obviously, we know that, and they made the quarterback change. And I tell you what, since they made the quarterback change, I mean, they're -9 in turnovers, which you say -9, you're not going to beat anybody.
Right.
But majority of that was early in the season. They made the quarterback change, and our man Harburg, he's doing a lot better job of protecting the ball, and he's a dual threat quarterback, can throw it and run it. So if they keep winning, they're going to have to do it with their defense. I mean, that's what they're made off of. But when you run the ball like they do, you got a chance every week. And they need one more win for a bowl game. I would tell Matt Rule, Matt, don't win too fast. Okay, I'm telling you, I did that once. The Dolphins, we went to the second round, of the won the division.
Pace yourself.
Wait, and won 12 games, and the next year everybody wants you to win 15.
Yes.
I mean that's not realistic. So Matt, get to that bowl game, and don't win too fast, buddy.
They still have Michigan State and Maryland as crossovers. They go to Wisconsin. Of course, they finish up with the game against Iowa, as they do every year. But Nebraska very much in the hunt.
Oh.
I hear what you're saying on don't win too fast, but, man, if they could make it to Indy, what an amazing story that would be.
And I hope they do.
Yes, no, I hear you. It would be an amazing story if Minnesota made it, too, if for no other reason than they've never been there. So it would be a first time for Minnesota. And, again, I'm not in any way counting anyone out going forward, but it's going to be more challenging for some of these Big Ten West teams when we go divisionless and when it's just the two top records in the league. It's not to say they can't do it, but if there's an opportunity to do it, this year feels like a better opportunity. And Minnesota right now, again, if it ended today, Minnesota's there. So how does Minnesota stay in that spot come the end of November?
They checked the box with Iowa and Nebraska already, right?
Yes.
I mean, they have beat
that's
Iowa
why they're
and Nebraska.
there. Right.
That's why they're, I mean, that's impressive now as the season goes on. I'll tell you, Brian Callahan, right, the offensive line coach, this guy, he deserves assistant coach of the year. Give it to him right now. How do you take your fourth-team running back and give him the ball 40 times, Rever? What do you have, 6 snaps, and he rushes for over 200 yards?
It's amazing.
To me, all the credit to him, yes, but that offensive line, we just talked about Iowa, up and down. This offensive line at Minnesota has gotten better and better and better from where they started with. And obviously Joe Rossi on the defense. I mean, he graduated some key guys, Marino and those guys last year. He had a good nucleus of guys, Terrell Smith, that have been around. So he kind of started over again with a lot of new guys, and it's a sophisticated scheme there at Minnesota. I've been there. So, I mean, they're doing a great job. Really are. The quarterback, to me, God, he makes me nervous. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Let's leave it at that. 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Most quarterbacks, in my opinion, you got to be 2-1 to kind of be a division guy. You really like 3-1. Right. Touchdowns to interceptions. And he's 50-50, and he makes me a little nervous, And probably if they had a better running game right now, that it wouldn't feel as bad. But for them to win and get in the championship, what I'm trying to say is the quarterback's going to have to win some games for them, and I don't know if they're ready there yet.
The big challenge, too, for them is we kind of went over who everyone's crossovers are. They go to Ohio State. So they are the one team where were they to win their crossover game, it would be a stunning upset. I mean, it would be a huge shock were they to do that, which just means, hey, you're just going to have to win all the other games. And I don't think anyone's running the table. I mean, I don't look at these schedules based on who these teams are right now and say someone's going to go 4-0. Now, they may, but it doesn't, no one screams 4-0 on paper. If you're already in first place and you go 3-1, you're probably in good shape.
I agree, yeah. And unfortunate thing, you said Ohio State, the first thought that came to my mind, you're probably going to be playing from behind. If you're playing from behind, the quarterback's going to have to make a lot of plays in the passing game.
Right. But beating Ohio State would be gravy, right? Yeah. I mean, they need to, here's the schedule, right? Illinois, Purdue, Ohio State, Wisconsin. So there's 4 teams.
They can beat them all.
There's 3 other teams they're deadlocked in this thing with. They've beaten 2 of them. Wisconsin's the other one. As long as they don't lose twice, they lost to Northwestern. So if Northwestern goes on some great run and gets in there, they'd have a tiebreaker against them. But otherwise, take care of business against the West. If you lose to Ohio State, you lose to Ohio State, and then you hope everyone else loses somewhere along the way.
This is so exciting. I'm just, as you're talking, you're firing me up. I'm sitting here saying to myself, man, the Big Ten West, as much as we say, it's muddied up and stuff, if you're a fan in the Big Ten, I mean, from Northwestern to Wisconsin,
Yes.
you are right there. I mean, it's exciting football. It really is.
I said this yesterday to Howard and Nicole, and as you know, I'm very limited in terms of the number of thoughts I have in my head, so occasionally I repeat myself. I mean, you got a 7-team division. You got more than half the division in first place,
Yep.
and another team that's a game back.
Yeah.
So it's fun. It's exciting. You got a lot of people engaged, feeling like they've got a chance to be in the postseason. Have to agree with Urban there. No doubt these guys are in the thick of the Heisman discussion. How does Harrison stack up with the best players you have seen at that position, both in your days as a college coach and as an NFL coach as well?
Yeah, you can't argue with Urban, with Randy Moss and Calvin Johnson, knowing those guys well. But I tell you what, watching him play, the guy that he reminds me most of, and just happens to be a Pitt alum, is Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
I mean, Larry Fitzgerald was that type of size,
Right.
athleticism, big body guy, strong guy. You know, Larry had all those touchdowns at Pitt. I think he had 22 touchdowns his senior year at Pitt or his last year at Pitt. You know, it's kind of funny because maybe I'll give our man Kyle McCord a little bit of a thought right here. So when I take over at Pitt, Larry had been just drafted. He was the 3rd pick of the draft by Arizona. So he's gone. But Tyler Pelko was the quarterback. He's back. So we're practicing, and I'm saying, watching him. Tyler was a good player, but I'm saying, God, how did we get all those touchdowns last year? So I go back and I watch the tape, and I say it surely couldn't be all Larry, because it's just like Marvin Harrison. How did Marvin catch 12 passes the other day when everybody knows he's the best receiver in the country? So it was Larry was that way at Pitt.
Yeah.
So I'm watching the tape. Defensive coaches, give them some credit. He was double covered. And even when he was double covered, Pelko threw him the ball when he went up and got it. So don't be nervous. Kyle McCord, listen to me. Throw it up to him, okay? This guy will go get it. I don't care how many guys are covering him. I mean, and that's a true story, and you know the rest is history with Larry. But I see Marvin being the same type of receiver. I mean, it's very difficult because of the size. If you're a little receiver and they double cover you, if you don't run by them, you're going to have a tough time making a play. But if you got the size and the athletic ability to go up in the air and get it, hey, now the big man that can jump the highest gets the ball.
Right, and when you have that size and that speed, kind of as Urban was getting at, that's what makes you crazy dangerous, which is what he is. So how about this matchup against Rutgers? I mean, you're going to Rutgers. Rutgers is coming off a bye week. They're feeling really good about themselves. They are playing very well. They have an outstanding defense. So, you know, whether or not Rutgers can move the ball against Ohio State, I think is another discussion. But if you talk about teams that can match up on the defensive side against the Buckeyes, what do you think about this matchup and the challenge for Ohio State?
The number one thing that I would start with, I would say this football team is 3rd in the Big Ten in turnover margin. They are +5. Rutgers is not going to give us the football easily. We're going to have to protect the ball in this game. That's how they make a living. And defensively, you mentioned them, River. I think they're 9th in the nation, not in the Big Ten, in the nation in yards per game given up. So they are a stingy defense. You're going to have to earn everything. You're going to have to protect the ball in this game. You know, it won't be easy. It won't be easy. You know, it wasn't easy, you know, early on. I mean, Rutgers has had the lead against Michigan, some teams early.
Yep.
But I think Rutgers has gotten better. You know, when I look at Rutgers and I look at their quarterback, Gavin Winsett, I don't know if he's gotten any better throwing the ball, but Greg has done a great job, and they have on offense of running the football, right? They run the football with a lot of success out of the backfield, but now they've gotten Winsett. They got the quarterback involved in it, you know? So that's going to be, you know, Ohio State's going to have to come into this one and be disciplined. Everything that they do, everything that Knowles puts together, Jim Knowles puts together, defense coordinator, every defense that you call this week, you're saying, who's got the quarterback? Okay, we're going to do it. Who's got the quarterback? You know, so it won't be easy. The thing that Rutgers can't do, in my opinion, is they're not a come-from-behind team. You know, they're a lot like Minnesota, a lot of these teams.
Right.
A lot like Nebraska. Some of these teams, if they get down by a couple of scores, that's when they have a challenge because they're not a throwing football team. So Ohio State, they got to come up with a way somehow to get a lead. Don't take this game into the fourth quarter with about 7 minutes to go in one way or another. Rutgers up there in that stadium, Schiano and those guys, that'll be a dangerous situation to be in. I don't care who you are.
One piece of news regarding Ohio State. Ryan Day at his news conference today said Mayan Williams, running back, out for the year. Remember, he was their leading rusher last year because Travion Henderson had all the injury issues. He's their third leading rusher this year, an unspecified medical procedure. So Mayan Williams is done for the season for the Bucs.
Good morning. Welcome to the inaugural LGBTQ Symposium by the Big Ten Conference. Yes. Happy Pride Month.
A group of student athletes, I'm going to say roughly 2 years ago, reached out and said they are queer student athletes on Big Ten campuses, and they've started a QSAC.
QSAC is the Queer Student Athlete Coalition. From what I've been told by Omar, we had enough voices, we had enough support from other administrators across the conference to say, okay, this is actually something the conference as a whole, as a central entity, needs to pay attention to, and this is the reason it's happening.
We proposed many ideas on how we can work together. One of them was a symposium.
The goal of the symposium, first and foremost, is to just celebrate Pride. We wanted to give them a platform or space to be able to be in community with each other, but then also come out with best practices.
It's very apparent that there are members of the LGBTQ+ community in sports, but we need to do a better job of knowing what areas we're falling short in and what areas we need to continue to excel at. There's going to be a lot of knowledge and stories, and I'm sure some raw moments from this that people will be able to show some vulnerabilities. And you hope that everybody that's in attendance will be able to take those experiences back, share them on their campuses, and let other people grow and learn from them.
As I walked in the building today, I was nervous, excited, didn't really know what to expect. It's really an opportunity for me to be able to be myself and start to meet other people that are not just awesome resources for the future, but also a part of the LGBTQ+ community.
The Big Ten Conference has been a leader in so many ways, giving voices to people who are marginalized, including myself. I hate being introduced and feeling like I have to introduce myself as the first female blank, the first female, full-time female voice for a men's professional basketball team or a men's professional team. I hate that. But I have to also realize that that's part of my story. And finding a voice as part of a marginalized group is part of all of our story, right?
To have a symposium, to invite us, to have people within your own ranks to speak and let them share their stories of them being a part of the LGBTQ+ community is mind-blowing. It was affirming to show that I'm in the right place and that the Big Ten really does have our backs.
I'm really proud of the Big Ten and proud of the fact that this is happening, that the conference office has spent time and put a priority on bringing us together and having the LGBTQ+ community really showcased. I'm just excited about the conference and Commissioner Petitti's commitment to this.
This is the first time I'm actually with and addressing student athletes, so I'm really excited to do that. The conference has taken a leadership role in lots of areas, and I'm pretty confident that this will be copied, right? And that's the goal, is when you do something first and you do it well, you want to make sure that you're leading. And I think this will lead to other conferences, other institutions doing these type of meetings. And the fact that we've got so many folks here and from all of our different members and how much of a priority is, it sends a really powerful message when you make something a priority. And that's what we're doing here today. We're making this a priority, and then I'm really optimistic and hopeful that that example will spread.
When we started QSAC, this integration into the conference and to be taken seriously is always what we hoped for.
I hope that everybody that returns back to their campuses are able to expound and share some of the experiences that they had with their larger campus, and that everybody that's here in these rooms can be a leader on their campus to help move some of these conversations forward as it relates to the LGBT community.
The future really relies on us as student athletes. When we build these communities, I want people to know that you're invited in it too. It's not just for us, it's for everyone. That's the whole point.
This is a process, and we are an army of progression. Look around this room, and it gives me chills to see student athletes and administrators and business people all in the same room, learning, supporting the same things. An army of progression as we all exit those doors.
It is time for Wanny's Winner of the Week. I know it's a highly confidential and exhaustive selection process, but give us a window into who you chose this week.
Well, on Halloween, my treat this week ever goes to the Northwestern Wildcats. And I'll tell you what, a thought came to mind when I'm watching the end of that game and everybody's fired up. You know, there's an old coaching expression, players don't care what you know until they know that you care. And I was watching the enthusiasm with those coaches and those players from where they were 3 months ago to now. And that was a great football win. I mean, offense, defense, special teams, everything. Everybody was into it, and everybody's believing right now. It's exciting. It truly is.
It really is an amazing story. I mean, I think most people kind of looked at this year and just said they probably weren't going to be very good to begin with.
Right.
They were chosen last place when people thought that Pat Fitzgerald was going to be their coach. And then to come out to be 4-4 when you had won 4 of your previous 24 coming into the year, it's pretty good. Halloween plans?
Get a cigar and sit on my daughter's porch and hand out candy.
That's beautiful. Enjoy that. It's going to be a little cold for that.
We'll see what time the temperature is.
We'll see you tomorrow.